Are you confident? Do you have consistency? How much conviction do you have? I'm Daniel Gomez, the Confidence Architect, a business strategist, keynote speaker, executive coach, and best selling author. On the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, we will help you unlock confidence to create consistency and develop conviction. Together, we will discover the key that unlocks your confidence. Welcome back to another episode of the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show. Whoa, I'm pumped up. I'm excited. The Derby just left us, and we got a special guest all the way from Louisville, Kentucky. And you know, here at the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, we motivate, we inspire, we add value to your life, we add value to your business. And I think this guest is going to add value all the way around, plus more. So let's welcome to the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, Mr. Scott Joseph. What's up, my brother?
How you doing, Daniel? Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it greatly.
Man, well, I know the epic gentleman you are. You know, you have J&L Marketing, you have some Honda dealerships. You're a phenomenal just speaker there on Clubhouse where we got a chance to meet. And I'll tell you, introduce yourself to the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show and let them know who you are and what you do and how amazing you are, man.
Well, you did a pretty good job. So, I was growing up, my father was selling vacuums at Sears, and he eventually made the switch and started selling cars, where he'd gone on and then rose up in the ranks to sales manager, and then eventually ran his own store. And so when you're a kid and your dad's selling of course, when you're a kid, everything's great as long as you got a lot of friends and stuff. But as I grew older, I'm watching the transition of our lifestyle change dramatically, from going from selling vacuums to cars to then GM, right? And so I fell in love with the auto business just because I saw it as a huge opportunity, and I saw the impact it had on our own family. And so I always wanted to become a general manager and run my own store. In fact, that was my top goal. Right. I had no motivations, no aspirations to own my own at any point. It was just to follow in my dad's footsteps, because when you're young, that's what you idolize. And that's what I wanted to do. And I literally was going to college. This is at University of Louisville. This is right in the middle of my sophomore year. My dad goes away on a 20 group. Now, for the last couple of years, I'd been bugging him. I'm a lot guy. I'm a lot tech, washing cars, getting everything organized. That is my job, right? And I sit here and I'm bugging him like, let me sell. I know I can do this. And he's just pushing me aside. No, I'm watching sales training tapes during my lunch hour. I had to blow the dust off of them because none of the sales team was actually watching.
You said tapes, right? I want to make sure I got the error right. Tapes.
Yeah, that gives it a VHS.
Hey, not 8-tracks, right?
No. These are VHS at a big machine, plugging these in, watching them. But he wouldn't give me the chance. So he goes away on a 20 group, and I'm halfway through this sophomore year at U of L, and he's the general manager. At the time, he was the most successful general manager for the Jeff Weiler organization up in Cincinnati. We were in Louisville. And I called up the Chevy store, which was their flagship store of the group in Cincy. And I requested an interview to sell cars. And they gave me the finance manager, who was about to become the sales manager at their Chrysler Plymouth store in Cincy. And he asked me, he goes, how quick can you get up here? And I said, well, I can be there in an hour and a half. And so I went up, I interviewed, he offered me the job. I took it. I moved out of the house. I moved up to Cincinnati from Louisville. And when my mom and dad came home from their 20 group, their oldest son had dropped out of college and was now a car salesman.
Man, I tell you, that's a boom right there. I don't know. They were probably like, son, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
But I love that because everybody wants the reward without the risk. And just the fact that you have the adventure in you to get out of that comfort zone, the adventure to, man, I can imagine inside your heart was beating like, oh crap, my dad's gonna kill me once he sees me, right? Because I imagine my dad, and it's like my dad wouldn't even have to spank me; he would just give me that look, right? Some of those fathers, they just give you that look, and you're like, you know, you're in trouble, and like, okay, dad, I get it, right? But what did you discover about yourself on that journey? Because I think so many times we have opportunities like just like you did, right? You reached out for an opportunity, you caught somebody, and even though it wasn't there where you were at, you got out of your comfort zone. And so many times we expect things in life and business to come to us. And what did you learn? Because you're a sophomore in college, well, you were. What did you learn at that moment about yourself that you want to share with us here today, Scott?
So my dad was extremely successful in sales. I think he was ranked in top 10 in the country when he was selling Lincoln Mercuries. Uh, Mercury dates myself again, but when I look back, I was fearless at that age. There was no limiting beliefs, at least in my mind. At least I didn't think there was. And I just figured I could easily do him, and I was very competitive. So I just figured I would instantly come in and blow away whatever he had accomplished. And I was going to prove a point, and rise up in these ranks. In my mind, I really thought that as long as I put up the numbers, I should be a GM within 3 or 4 years. That's how naive I was, because I was 19. And so I remember, so you asked what I learned. Well, first thing I learned is how ignorant I was and naive, because when I started selling and getting punched in the nose and reality hit me, I realized, oh, what have I done? And then some limiting beliefs started those things started creeping into me, right?
Yeah.
But Jeff Weiler, I always admired him a lot. Because of my dad's success with him, he's given us front row tickets to wrestling matches and all these different, Reds games and different things like that. And he pulls me in. He comes in one day, he pulls me in within the first few months. And I think, all right, here I go. Here's my opportunity. Now I'm gonna start elevating, right? And the first question out of his mouth was, "Why'd you drop out of school?" And I thought, it's I'm answering it, and he's going on and on about how in 10 years, when he's going to consider me as a potential general manager, the things that I'm going to need to know that I would learn from school. And I remember thinking to myself, first off, from that point on, I really didn't hear what he was saying, because I'm thinking to myself, 10 years? I didn't drop out of school to wait 10 years. If I knew it was going to take 10 years, I'd have just stayed in school. So I had no interest in waiting 10 years for an opportunity. And I also did not believe that school was going to teach me anything that I needed to know when it came to the auto industry. And the reason I said, because my dad didn't go to school. Yeah. And so my point of reference was that. Looking back, I will tell you this. The biggest thing that I've learned is really how it's shaping me in terms of my approach to the young people in our organizations. And that's this. I went and initially really struggled a great deal when it came to this millennial generation, or some people. There was a disconnect in terms of how I operated and led compared to how they responded best. Let's just say it that way. I grew up in an environment that was extremely intense. There was hollering. And, my dad, eventually I was selling for him, and he had no problem hollering and wrinkling up and crumpling up my buyer's orders and everything like that. I mean, I was intimidation at its finest, right? But he was my dad. He knew he could get away with it. And so my managing style, I never went through any classes. I never had any training in that area. So I did what I knew. And I probably ran off some good people. I look back, and what I've learned from that is one thing I've always been frustrated with on new people is they think the results come instant.
Yes.
A lot of times I get frustrated with when a new hire comes in and they're not patient enough. I'm not talking about, I like them not being patient because I want them to want great results quick. But at the same time, you have to build relationships. You have to build experience. There's a lot of things that go into making someone great, right?
Exactly.
And what I've learned though, is I look back on myself and I say, what you're getting frustrated about with these young people, you were 10 times worse.
Woo, that's a boom, baby, right there, right? Boom. Hey. The part of the show where I tell my audience, like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, Scott's going to drop some more wisdom right now. You definitely want to get out your pen and paper. Something magical happens when you put pen to paper. You retain 80% more of what you write down. So take some notes, because Scott is a very successful, right? Scott Joseph is a very successful business owner. He has 3 dealerships, owner of J&L Marketing, a very, very accomplished, successful gentleman in his own right. But you're hearing the humbling beginnings of what he went through. And how many times, write this down, how many times are you impatient and you want the overnight instant gratification? And the way he started this podcast is amazing, because so many people right now, all you want to do is you just want to taste the victory, but you don't want to get the fire to be, you don't want to go through the fire to get refined. And that's what Scott's talking about right now. Think about that. His own dad didn't give him the opportunity because maybe he felt he wasn't ready. And Scott took it upon himself to go to a couple of miles away up there to Cincinnati and let me do this. But listen to what he said. He got hit in the face. Maybe you got hit in the face right now and you need to hear this, because you thought doing business was going to be easy. You thought just doing things your way was going to be easy. And Scott got humbled real quick is what I'm hearing. Maybe God's humbling you right now. So take notes and listen from this man, because I'll tell you what, he's very accomplished. Scott Joseph, I have a lot of respect for him. And my friend, so continue on, man. I'm loving this, right? So your dad crumbles up your paper, you're there, and like,
I used to be trying to.
So now you're hiring millennials, and you're like, why don't they get it? And you're like, man, but they're not as bad as I was. So
No, within 2 years of selling cars, a year within selling cars, I was 20 years old, and I thought I should be sales manager already. And so I look at the young people today, and it makes it easier for me to remind myself I had the same outrageous, unwarranted expectations on what I thought I deserved as they do. And I'm not saying I have all the answers when it comes to making that easier or getting them to understand that they're not ready for something yet. I'm still not great at that, but it does allow me to have a little more empathy for their situation, to where I'm no longer just sitting there and getting upset with them, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think a lot of times I see that with my own son. You know, he wants to rush forward, and I try to tell him, slow down, son. But you know, I think we got to remember, for me, it's like every kid, every son wants to be like his dad, right? And he wants to run with dad. But I've learned to be more patient and to really pay attention to the words that we use. And I think so many times, not just as the leaders of our household, but also the leaders in any organization, but especially in a dealership, we don't really, I see so many managers as I go in there and do my leadership development, my sales training, that we don't pay attention to our tonality. And especially with this younger generation, you got your Gen X and your millennials. It's like when you raise your tone to a certain level, it shuts them down, and we don't realize that. And you gotta pivot the way a lot of dealerships and businesses pivoted in 2020. You have to really just pivot your leadership style and your leadership development. And so many dealerships, automotive, it's like they don't invest in that part of it, and it's crucial. And I think what you're saying, people need to hear that, because if not, like you said, you ran away some great people that next thing you know, guess what? They're being top salesmen at another organization, another dealership. And you're like, damn it, I could have used him.
That's true.
So let me ask you this: where in your journey, as you you go from the lot guy, right? For those that don't know, it's called a porter position in the automotive industry. Yeah. And you became this salesman. Where in that journey did you lose your confidence? And what did you learn about yourself in that season? Because it didn't come as easy as you thought when you lost your confidence.
Very early. So I went in with unreal expectations of thinking I was going to put up 20, 30. Back then, it was rare to see someone putting up 50 cars a month. There's a lot more people that are doing numbers today that back in those days were almost unheard of, right? So, but when you were doing 20 to 30 plus, maybe 40 cars a month back then, you were top of that food chain. And I thought I'd instantly come in and do that. And I remember thinking, wow, I went through all these trainings. I've watched all this video stuff. And even just in the first few customers, it's like I forgot everything. I knew nothing, right? And so I would say the first few months, I didn't sell anywhere close to what I thought, but it did not scare me, and it did not stop me. So one thing that I started doing that I did learn from the tapes that didn't require a lot of practice was prospecting. So back then there was no BDC, business development center, call centers, or anything like that. There was no social media. So if you were selling cars, you were at the mercy of the traffic coming in. So one of the things that I used to do is every Sunday, the dealership was closed. Every Sunday, I would go into the classified section and I would call every single person in the classifieds trying to sell their car, asking them why they were selling it, and were they looking for another car. And I actually sold my first car prospecting. I remember his name. It was Muhammad. I don't remember his last name, but that was the first car I ever sold, was through that method. And so that helped me. That practice and that exercise helped me on the agency side. So long story short, and I'll finish this up. I got discouraged selling cars because I wasn't making the money I thought I should. So within a couple years, I had a friend that was selling sale events to car dealers and making a fortune. And so he talked me into starting J&L marketing with him. He was the L, I was the J. And we started doing that, and the agency took off. And that's what enabled me to buy the 3 dealerships. So I came around and got into the dealership as owner in a completely opposite way, or reverse, in a backwards way. Never imagined it happening that way. But this prospecting story I told you, that helped me with the agency, because when I started the agency, it was 100% prospecting.
Yeah.
There was no leads coming in. There was no internet. There was no website. Certainly didn't have budget to market ourselves. We weren't going to NADA and setting up booths at the time. It was picking up phones, calling people. And I just had a tremendous...
So let me ask you this. So you're bringing up a great topic right now. I think for any entrepreneur, for any business, they don't pick up the phone.
No.
They don't pick up the phone, and they don't prospect. That's a huge word right now, that when I go into some of these small businesses and I said, okay, well, regardless of what business you have, no business survives without revenue. So I go in there, and one of the first questions I ask is, okay, what are you making? What's your profitability? And let me see your sales process. And they're like, what do you mean sales process? And if they ask that question, right, what's sales process? What's the stuff says, they don't have one.
You mean a walk around? You mean a walk around?
just in general, it could even be with, it could even be the other day we were looking at, there was an appliance store. It's like, you got to follow up. And many places, they don't follow up. And I can tell you that it goes back to, a lot of things have innovative and change, but the sales process is a sales process for many organizations. And if you don't have a sales process in place, it's not going to be. And one of the reason I bring that up is because you triggered me with the word prospect, right? You got to go out there and call. And so many people, they post something on Facebook, they don't get the immediate result. Even on Clubhouse, right? A lot of people that started on Clubhouse where I met you, they're already gone. They're like, hey, you haven't seen this person, because they don't get that instant gratification, that instant result. And there takes times where you got to prospect and build up who you are. They have to be, right? It goes back to that. Do they like and trust you? And that's what you're saying. You got a prospect. And how many, I want to ask you this. How many times did the door get slammed in your face, Scott, and you still got up?
I had no choice. My partner left me so we started it in January 91. So that was the launch of, was it Desert Storm, whatever the first Gulf War was with the first President Bush.
Desert Storm. Yeah, it was Desert
Yeah,
Storm.
yeah. So Desert Storm. And so those were all the excuses that we were hearing at the time, right? Well, I don't know what, we just started a war. And it was really just a nice way of saying, you haven't even done one of these yet, and you have no customers. I'm definitely not giving you my money. So that's really what it was. So my partner left, and I had put, at the time I had saved $17,000. That's why I invested in J&L. So I put all that money in. So I'm thinking like, well, this is all my savings. I had to succeed mentally. That's how I was viewing it. And my dad helped me get into one store, and of course he was running events. So I was able to show success, but it was still my father's store. So it didn't have a lot of credibility, but he got us into one of his stores, Jack Walker Pontiac Toyota up in Dayton, Ohio. We go in and one day we sell 64 cars. So, I mean, from that point forward, my selling style, I didn't care if it was good or bad. I just needed to get revenue in, like you said, right? Or it wasn't going to be, we weren't going to be around long.
Or the doors closed.
That's right. So every single person that had told me no up to that point, I called and I said, hey, we just sold 64 cars in one day. If that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. And so 4 or 5 stores. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And then it just built from there. And but the biggest thing that you learn when you're doing something like that, because you and I met on Clubhouse, right? There's a lot of young entrepreneurs, business leaders. When I say young, I'm talking about young in the business. In other words, it could be a startup type company thing, something like that. I think a lot of times when I listen to them talk about their issues or problems or challenges, they underestimate the importance of listening to their customer. Yeah. So very early on, there were 3 things that we did as an agency that helped separate us from everybody else. And it wasn't some genius move on my part. I knew nothing about marketing when I started this marketing agency. But what I did notice very quickly was when I called someone up following an event, if I didn't have my data and my numbers to talk to them, it made it difficult, because some dealers would sit there and say, wow, this was great. And then other dealers would be complaining about a lack of traffic or they didn't sell enough. But I had nothing to go on in terms of being able to carry that conversation further and either figure out why or how I could help it. And so we literally, not out of genius, just out of survival mode, listening to our customers and saying, how do we make these Monday calls go better? We built a database. And at the time, we were the only people that did this. And it blows me away. We built a database where I could track every element of the campaign, the headline, the dates, the offers, the hook. It didn't matter. And then we tracked all the foot traffic coming in. There was no internet traffic back then. And we asked them we were asking all the same qualification type questions. I wanted to take that pressure off the dealer's team, right? Because they were having more traffic than they were used to. So I was helping them there. I'm listening to that. They needed help there.
Yes.
We needed to improve results. So I was looking at data so I could improve the conversations after. But you know what that did for me? After a couple of years, I was like, man, we have all this data. Why aren't we putting this into an actual working database and actually improving these results? I keep hearing dealers say these direct mail events, they work great the first time and then they just go downhill. I said, well, I've got all this data. I should be able to recognize what works and eliminate what doesn't. So we started doing things like that. And then I was hearing them They wanted more preparation. They wanted their team better prepared for these things. And so
let me ask you this, how important, you said a word right there, preparation. I think that's where many people in life and business, right? Because if you're a small business, you are the business, right? You're the face of the business. If you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, however you want to label yourself, if you have 10 employees or less, the leader's still responsible. But sometimes it appalls me how many times they're not prepared. How important is that preparation? And I think about, you mentioned the comment earlier about the Gulf War had started back in Desert Storm, and how dumb it would be, and I use the word dumb, if we would send soldiers that weren't trained in basic training, the Marines, that didn't have the knowledge to go into these type of environments. That's kind of like what you're saying, right? There, you got to be prepared. And part of preparation to go to war is you got to go through basic training. And so many times in business, we don't want to go through the preparation. And that preparation, those trials and errors are what are going to make us great. And look at you, many years later, decades later, you're still doing some of the basic, simple principles that people oversee because they don't think it's important. But in reality, without the proper foundation, no business is going to survive. Would you agree with that?
it's critical in every area, Daniel. So think about this. So I was just talking to you about how do we prepare our clients so they can maximize opportunities, right?
Yes.
They want that. They don't necessarily know how to do it specific to a product they might buy. So they need the help of whatever partner that they're working with. But you've got to do it as a business leader, like you were saying. Listen, I can remember when we started growing and having opportunities on deals that we would have never gotten a chance for in the first few years. I mean, we're talking large revenue opportunities. I would stay up literally all night in front of a mirror. You said earlier, write that stuff down because you retain better. I would write down as if I was giving a pitch and it was going perfectly, word for word, how I wanted to say it. And I would stay up all night looking in the mirror, practicing that pitch to where when the real pitch happened and I don't have my notes in front of me and I mess up, it didn't matter because I was so prepared. I could recover, and my tone was spot on, how I'm delivering it, which is my physiology was right. I prepared on every aspect. And as the business grew and I'm pitching less because I've got a team doing it and I've got to be in other areas, when I would get brought back in to pitch a big deal, I hated it. And you know why I hated it? Because I was rusty, and which meant it meant that I had to prepare that much harder. Because I'll tell you what drove my own personal preparation was my ego. At some point, you build a brand up, and you feel like there's this expectation on you, right? And now all of a sudden, you got to go deliver, and you've got your own team there, and you've got the potential client there, and you're like, well, I don't want to make a fool out of myself. So you've got to you go over the top. And I grew to hate the preparation, but it has to happen. It has to happen.
I'm laughing because you made me remember. I'll never forget in 08, I bought my Corvette. And I was there. Guess what my plates were?
What?
Closer.
Nice.
Closer, right? With the K. I was closer with the K because I was a killer, right? Yeah. I'm a closing machine. That was my mindset. And you know, I didn't know what I was walking into because that was my mindset. There was no one that I couldn't close in the yard, right? Bring them to me, I'll close them. And that was my mindset. So then they were, okay, closer, here you go. Let's go. Walk your plates now. And it's like, it was that added pressure. If you're going to advertise it, guess what? You better walk in that. And I'll tell you, there was some times that I fell on my face. I had pancake syrup all over me, but you know, it made me a better closer. And that's what got me running the Chevrolet dealership, because I had no fear. And I failed many, many times, but I said, well, all I can do is get back up. And then there was those times when I was running the Chevrolet store, you know, you're there, you're worried about orders and what was your profit and loss at the auction. And sometimes the receptionist was late, right? You have all these other things to worry about. And hey, boss, so-and-so's busy. I come talk to this guy. And I'm like, your mind's not there, but those instinctive behaviors come back and you're rusty. And I would just be like, okay, well, let's have fun with this, right? So I learned to laugh at myself a little bit, have fun with it instead of being so serious. But when you said that, I thought about that. They're like, hey, if you're gonna advertise it, you better walk in that.
A couple things real quick. First off, when you said talk about your closing and your mental state and your attitude with that, it reminds me of my dad. I was selling cars. I went to TO a deal to him, and we're walking up the hallway back to the showroom, and I said, "You think we'll get him?" And he just, without wasting a second, well, if I can't close it, no one can. so, so I was like, all right, you know, that felt good. But you were saying something else, and I've lost my train of thought. But it'll come back to me. But you had said something there, and I wanted to touch on it, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah, but so I love what you're saying, right? Because you looked up to your dad. You're like, yeah, that was my mentality. If I can't close them, no one can, which was good and bad.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, my 20 years in the car business before I left here 4 years ago, it was a blessing because I'll never forget. My son goes, Dad, can you come with me to career day? And I was like, yeah, sure, son. And he's like, Dad, right at the time I was running the Chevy dealership, and he's like, can I get one of those name tags? Like you have one? And I was like, you really want one, Julian? And he got my son was probably like 7 or 8 years old. He was young. I said, yeah. So I got him one. He got a little suitcase, right? Because I used to carry my little briefcase with me sometimes. And he got my old one, and he put on a tie. And I looked at him and I'm like, look at this kid, right? But he learned that from me. But I say that because now he's one of the top producers. He'll be a senior at Texas State University here already. But he's one of the top sales professionals there at it's called the Wash Tub, and it's the biggest hand tie wash tub. But he does very well. And I look at him and it's like, he goes, Dad, I'm a selling machine, I'm a closing machine. And I would say that in the mirror all the time. But I say that because look at you. You don't think about it, but your dad told you that one moment, and that stuck with you because it was implanted in your soul. And to you, you're like, I'm going to close these, even though you weren't having success. In the back of your mind is, I'm going to close these marketing deals.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that I've carried that mental state with me, and it's funny you say that it's stuck with me. I mean, I remember that like it was yesterday. I bring it up all the time. It really hit home with me, and I've done a lot of like Anthony Robbins training, things such as that. As we went through the agency, and I realized we've got to improve our skill set. So I'm a big believer in continuous improvement and learning. I love what you do. I think I'm very big on understanding, limiting, and empowering belief systems. And that's an example of a very empowering belief system, right? And as great as that can help you and give you confidence and probably allow you to take more action or have more activity to some of your desires and your dreams and your ambitions. These limiting beliefs can have the opposite impact, right? Yes. And I can remember times where I'll give you, when I was selling cars, you asked, did I ever start doubting? I remember having a conversation with a group of salespeople. It was slow that night. And I look back at this and it's no wonder I wasn't having success. And we're talking about income and somebody was talking about 300,000 or 400,000. And to me at that time in my life, I'm 21 years old. I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And I remember saying to that group, well, it's not like I'll ever make that kind of money. Yeah. And here's a couple of these salespeople, none of them making six figures, but actually said to me, well, not if you think like that. So it's one thing for someone making it and having high, but here are people that are making no more than me correcting me. And I remember thinking, but as I went through the training and I'm looking at I'm listening and I'm learning about limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs, I look back at that and think, no wonder your career was in the toilet at the time, right? And quite honestly, you were living nowhere near the life you thought you would have.
Yes. So let me ask you this. This is a great question to ask you, right? Because we're here in the moment of it. What are the two biggest limiting beliefs that you had to overcome, Scott, for yourself to take J and L to the next level?
Good question. That we could play with the big boys, for one. There was a limiting belief that when I started having sales reps and some were achieving some decent success, one was my brother. And he kept wanting to go to Chicago and New York and these big metro markets. And I'm like, we're having all this success in these rural markets, right? And we're growing. We're trying to expand that footprint. And I was like, why do you want to go? And he just did. He was fearless. And he just did it. And lo and behold, thank God he did it, because that's where the big dealers were.
Yeah, the bigger budget. They had the bigger budget. It's like, here, I'm tired of making $10,000, brother. I want to get that $40,000 payday.
Yeah, he goes up to Chicago, forms an incredible relationship with the Bob Rohrman Group. That's 30-something stores. And all of a sudden, he starts showing all the other reps it's social proof to the other people. And it exploded from there. And lo and behold, then all of a sudden, we started getting opportunities for tier 1 and tier 2 work. And it just kept going. So I look back, and it's a horrible limiting belief that you can't compete or you're not ready yet.
And how did you overcome that? Because I'm a big believer
well,
in this. I go back
I didn't overcome that one. I got help from my actual sales team to overcome that one. How I've overcome it now, a similar situation. I try not to allow limiting beliefs to come in. I can consciously recognize when they start creeping in, and I say that, but that doesn't mean I'm perfect at it.
So give us an example, because I really want to add some value, because there's a young entrepreneur right now, a young business person right now. They're on the brink of the next level, but they're holding themselves back because there's something going on in that mind. They're playing that tape, like you said, right? They're playing that old VH tape in their head over and over. What's something that you can give us of advice, of wisdom, that to come over that?
It's not going to be anything new. You just got to go do and quit waiting for things to be perfect. Because in your mind, for instance, if I take that same situation, I'm sitting there saying, we're not ready yet. You're not.
Ooh, that word yet. I like that.
And so it's your way of saying, it's a way to disguise a limiting belief, right? I don't have a limiting belief. We're going to be there, just not yet, right? And the only way you get there is a lot of times through failing. And so you've got to fail your way forward.
Yes.
So you fall down, I want to fall forward. And so I am better at consciously recognizing my beliefs, or my empowering ones and my limiting ones. But I will tell you this. I just did an interview on our podcast with Ira Davis, and Ira. And he goes, the limiting beliefs can creep in any time, and you've always got to be on guard for this. And so I remember thinking, in the last few years, I'm searching for something greater. All right. So if I look back on my life, I have accomplished much more than if I go back 20, 30 years than I ever thought I would at that time. It's not even close. But I don't feel fulfilled, Daniel. I'm still searching. And I feel like I have found there's some things I've discovered about myself here in the last year or two that have put a spark back in me, that I know what I'm here to do, right?
Yes.
But I haven't went after it, because I am thinking, I don't have any, look at all that I've accomplished. I've had an empowering belief system. You can have a comfort zone of different sizes.
Exactly.
I just have a much bigger comfort zone right now.
Boom, baby. I love that.
Right.
Write that down, because there's so many businesses that hit a plateau because it doesn't matter if you're if you make your first 100,000, your first quarter million, your first million, your first 5 million, or if you have 100 million, there's always a plateau where you get comfortable. And if you stop growing, guess what? You start dying. When you're green, you grow. When you ripe, you rot.
And I had to sit back and think to myself, you haven't moved this forward. You're acting like you don't have a limiting belief. You act like you're not afraid to take that next step, but you are, because you want it and you haven't done it. And so
Yes.
I've sat here and I've thought, all right, so, and for me to move forward, I have to give up control in some things. So I've got a great partner and president running J&L now. It means I have to give up some of that. I have to give up. I'm not a micromanager, but I've got to give up having a say in everything. Let him take the handcuffs off this man and let him go. Because quite honestly, right now, he's better at running that agency than I am. All right. And it frees me up to do the things that inspire me, that give me, you know, a lot of joy and happiness.
Yeah, well, the thing is so many times we forget this, is that life is a series of seasons. And just the way fall comes and winter comes and then next, spring comes and summer, we have seasons in business. And of course, when revenues are high and you have a great bottom line, you want to save up for whatever comes up ahead of you. But so is our positions, right? So many times we want to stay in that same position because we get comfortable, and kind of God's nudging us to go, come on, Scott Joseph, let's go. Hey, dude. And then Scott and Daniel don't listen. He goes, okay, guys, I've been nudging you. And then he has to turn into that eagle, right? Like that mother, and she has to push out those eaglets. And okay, I've been telling you to fly higher. You're not going to fly on your own. I'm going to push you out of the net. And it's not that she doesn't love the eagles, the eaglets, right? Her baby eaglets. She doesn't love them. She loves them, but they were born for more. And there's always another level. And we don't even realize that because we get comfortable in our level of success, whatever that is to us.
And you talk about God a lot, and you're a believer, and I have to tell you, I love it. And here lately, the books, the messages, the clubhouse rooms, the people I have been exposed to, the message has all been the same. Tim Story, the miracle mentality. Bob Goff, dream big. All these things, I keep getting the same message put in front of me. And the realization hit me, I need to wake up and recognize that I have a certain message being put in front of me. I need to recognize it, what it is. It is what it is. This is what I am being told I need to do, right? And I mean, it is sign after sign after sign after sign. And it's, I'm excited. I'm very excited about the next chapter.
Yeah, man. Well, the thing is this, is that I think at every level of life, you go from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s, right? And you grow, you mature. When you're 20, you don't care. It's all about self. As you get into your 30s, you start to have a family. Then 40, then the body kind of, things start to happen here and there. And then next thing you know, it's like, okay, what else is there? I can only have so many Rolexes. I can only have so many sports cars. And there has to be something bigger than myself. And I think for me, it was, okay, how can I contribute? How can I give back some way, somehow, even more? And I think that for me, it's like God is the centerpiece of that, because I'll tell you what, Scott, I was very selfish. I was very, very selfish. I thought about Daniel Gomez all the time, every day. But I learned quickly that wasn't the way I wanted to. Well, not that I learned quickly, but I learned real quickly that that's not the path he had for me. And I think when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was a real eye opener that it didn't matter. Your promise ain't going to save you. Your title's not going to save you at the end of the day. It's what are you doing, what you have. And actually this morning, my wife made me tear up because I gave her permission. And not that I gave her permission, but I said, hey, I gave you permission. You tell me now, in this state of my life, as a 47-year-old man, you tell me when I'm being selfish, because I don't want to be selfish anymore, because I was real selfish. And if I can't let my wife speak into me, if I don't give her permission to speak to me, then I'm not doing right. So she came to me this morning. She says, hey, I forgot to tell you something. God reminded me this morning in prayer. I was like, what? Remember when you told me that to tell you when you're being selfish? I said, yeah. I was like, oh man, I failed, right? When was I selfish? That was my expectation. She goes, well, you weren't selfish. You were very selfless when Julian came down this weekend, which is our son. Because he's a senior. He's going to be a senior next month, already in Texas State. And, I give him what he needs, but a lot of times I don't give him those above and beyond rewards, right? And he's like, hey, Dad, I got this going on. And I said, okay, great. And the fact that you bought Julian his new cell phone, right? You were being selfless. I said, wow. He goes, well, not only that, we went to the mall. I went to the mall, right? Because I'm pretty particular about my underclothing. So I only go to one store to get my underclothing. And we're there. We go to the mall, and then I'm like getting my underclothing. And then she's like, hey, I'm like, look for some stuff. And she goes, and the fact that we went for you, but we ended up buying just one thing, and you bought me like 10 things, like you were being selfless. So thank you for that. And she teared up. But I wasn't always like that, right? It wasn't always like that for me. And if you can't give in your home, if you can't show that leadership in your home, then how can you show that to your employees, to the people around you? And I think the message nowadays is really to be selfless, because when your employees see you're being selfless, man, anybody who feels appreciated, they're going to go above and beyond for you, Scott. They're going to go above and beyond for you. Whoever's listening to this, you need to understand that you've been the wrong type of leader for many years now, and it's time to start being selfless and give more to the employees, and then even more important, give more to your customers. There's times that I'm tired and I'll be like, God will drop an idea in me, and I'll send somebody a voicemail, just a word of encouragement, right? Because I do a lot of executive coaching and business coaching, and they're like, man, how do you know what to say? I was like, I don't. God just puts it in my heart. But one word can change a person's life. One word can change a person's life. And I think that you're just at that season of your life, Scott, where it's time to leave your legacy, to really truly leave the real footprint while you were here. Yeah. That's where you're at. I think you were just fighting it because so many times we think that our identity is in the title that we carry.
Yeah. Well, you get afraid, which allows limiting beliefs to come in, that I don't want to lose what I have, right? Whether that's title, status, financial, whatever it might be, control, power, all those things. You don't want to give up what you've already got. But you don't necessarily have to. And I think a lot of that, we tend to worry about things that, I try not to worry, right? Because when you worry, you experience the same amount of pain as if it had already happened to you. And more than usually, whenever something comes to pass, it's never as bad as what we put in our head. So I try to just let things come to me in terms of, I try not to stress too much about things that I cannot control.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, think about it. Everybody thought they were in control last year. Who was in control? Nobody, right?
Nobody.
The world thought they were in control. We got presidents from this country, from that country. We got these people, that people. And at the end of the day, it didn't matter because Corona took control. Let's be real about it, right? So Let me ask you this. I want you to take a moment, look into the mic, speak to the camera, and speak to somebody right now who needs a word of encouragement, Scott. They've had a rough first quarter. The books don't look good. You've been there, right, as a young business owner. Give us a word of encouragement for that person right now, right? Look into the camera and speak into the mic and give us a word of encouragement and just speak what's on your heart for that person that wants to, either they're contemplating giving up or they're at the, like my dad used to say, I'm at the end of the rope. I'm that little cat at the end of the rope and I can't hang on any longer.
Well, I would say, obviously, don't give up. However, what I would say is you have to really assess, are you doing, and I know everyone talks about doing something that they're passionate about, but don't make the mistake of giving up and justifying it by saying, I'm just not passionate about this. Sometimes we justify our moving on, giving up, our failures, or quitting, right? We justify it with some type of logical reason. I'm not passionate about that. That's not what I truly love. That's not the case. And what I would say is lean into something a little bit heavier, keep going. There's nothing, I think, that, as I said earlier, everything in your head is usually 10 times worse than the reality of the situation. Last March, you brought up COVID. When everybody went into lockdown, I can promise you there wasn't a business, unless you were selling masks and toilet paper, there wasn't a business around where everybody wasn't in, at least at one point, worried greatly for not just their business and their own well-being, but for all their employees, right? And none of that necessarily materialized the way we initially thought. And I think the strongest leaders probably allowed that a lot of panic and worry to get in there for a day or two. But what successful people do is they start asking themselves better questions, Daniel.
Yes.
All right. And so I guess the best answer to your question is ask yourself better questions. What about this situation isn't perfect yet? What can I do differently to get a better result? You know, what excites me about this? What is it that I like about this? It's not about doing affirmations. All right. It's about asking questions that force your brain to come up with answers and solutions. If you were a business leader and you've got an issue or a big challenge or a problem that you've got to solve, you don't do it by saying to yourself or saying to your team, how did we let ourselves get to here? You know, what else can you ask questions like, all right, what is it about this? Where's the opportunity in this? All right. What can we do to add more value? What can we do to get a better result? So to me, it's about focusing on the questions we ask ourselves. I brought this up a couple times on Clubhouse, and I don't always articulate this well. So I know this is a podcast, so without seeing my hands, I have no idea what people are going to be having in their head. But the negative, what you put in your brain is so important.
Yes.
And I equate it to like a gallon of water. You take the lid off the gallon of water, and let's say that gallon of water is your brain. And it's full of all the positivity, the enthusiasm, the drive, the ambition. All right. That water represents all of that. And when you go to pour it out, you hear that gulping sound. And what that gulping sound is air coming in and meeting the water in the neck of that gallon, correct?
Yes.
And the reason is, listen, only two things, there's only enough capacity. There's only enough space in that gallon. You can either fill it with all the water, and in this, what I'm relating to is the positivity, the answers to the right questions, or you can let the negativity, the air get in. And the more air, the more negativity that gets into that gallon, the less water fits. All right. And so your brain works the same way. The more negative thoughts you put into it, the worse your questions, the worse your outcome. The better your questions, because questions make us focus, even the ones we ask ourselves. The questions we ask ourselves force our brain to focus on either good or bad. So ask yourself better questions.
I love that. I say that, right? When I do my corporate trainings, I say, you want to improve your organization, the quality of your life, the quality of the organization is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself.
There you go.
And I love what you just said, man. I'm getting sad here because we're coming to the end of our show, man. And but let me ask you this: what is a scripture, or what is a quote a quote that you lean on when you're just having those days. I call them character. My son, we laugh because we call them character building days, right? Because I would get home from when I was a young salesman. He's like, "Hey, Dad, how was your day today?" I was like, "Oh, I made a lot of friends, son." It was a character building day, so that's our terminology for those rough days. So when you're having those character building days, what's a quote or what's a scripture that you lean on that you just kind of say to yourself to help you get back on track?
I go back. I don't go to any quotes or phrases. And so first, I read scripture every day. But if you're going to ask me to quote one, I'm not going to be able to.
Well, just something a saying. It doesn't have to be word
I go
for
back
word.
to no, Daniel. What I do is I go back to the questions.
Go back to the question.
I don't read a quote and be like, all right, I don't read a quote from another person. Now, social media, we'll throw quotes out all the time, we'll share all that stuff, but I don't sit there and read quotes from people. All right. And that doesn't change my outlook. I consciously am aware when I've got a bad vibe going on or I'm not in the right mental state. And I do ask myself different questions. And so I will sit there and say, all right, what's not right about this yet? What's not perfect about this now? How can I make this better? Why am I excited? When I go to meet someone that I don't know, an example of a question I will ask myself is, and by the way, I ask a follow-up question if I don't know the answer. I might say, what do I like about this person? Because I want to be in the right mental state when I go to talk to this person. And by the way, I think that's a good thing you can do for someone that you might have conflict with or a potential tension with. What do I like about this person? And the common answer is nothing, right? Especially if it's someone you don't necessarily like or I don't know.
Yes.
When I don't know the answer, I always ask this follow-up question to myself. And I also do it to people that give me this answer. If I hear the answer, I don't know. I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would it be?
Oh, yes.
All right. I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would it be? Right. And it
What do
forces
I
me
like
to
about
go,
this person? I like that.
I don't know. Well, if you did know, if you did know, what do you think it would be? Well, they're kind of like me. They're dealing with the same struggles that I'm dealing with. They're another business owner, right? They probably have very similar challenges in finding great salespeople or dealing with frustrations on maybe you have beliefs about some of your employees that are more empowering than they have for themselves. And that can be frustrating for a business leader, right? So I go to not phrases and quotes. I go straight to the questions I ask myself.
I love
every
that.
time.
As a matter of fact, you say that, and no wonder I love you so much, man. This is a question I ask myself every morning. What am I going to do today that others don't do, can't do, and will not think of doing? What am I, Daniel Gomez, going to do today that others don't do, can't do, and will not think of doing?
And listen, you don't listen to quotes and phrases to motivate. You listen to scripture, and you have your faith. Now that I'm gonna listen to. All right, that I'm going to listen to. Right, I don't care what another man says and puts up a phrase or a quote. God says something, I want to listen to it and pay attention a little bit more.
Amen. So, man, they're listening to this episode right now. They're like, "Who is this Scott Joseph guy? I need to find him." If you look at him on camera, he has what? Look, I'm telling you, we have a lot of the right. You don't even realize it. He has this big old gold belt, J&L audio. It reminds me. When I was a kid, I used to like to watch Bruiser Brody. Me and my dad would go to wrestling all the time. The Von Erichs, man. Ric Flair, right? The Golden Boy. Woo! Look at him. He has a picture of him. Man, that was it. Back in the day. So how do we get a hold of you, Scott Joseph? If somebody wants to connect with you and just really move by what you said today, how do we get a hold of you, sir?
Well, you can join me on Clubhouse at Scott T. Joseph. So the T stands for Thomas. So I'm also on Instagram at Scott T. Joseph. You can follow me. I'm all over LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can follow me basically on every social channel. I'm not on Twitter. So it's the one I'm not on. but I'm on everything else. And then Twitter got too negative for me. I just couldn't stand it anymore. And so I got off of there. But that's the easiest way. And then you can reach out to me by email, sjoseph@j&lmarketing.com. Just spell out the word and. So jnlmarketing.com.
Woo! There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Another amazing episode here on the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show. And if you're stuck in business, if you're stuck in life and you need some help, reach out to us at Shield of Faith Coaching. Go to www.danielgomezglobal.com. That's www.danielgomezglobal.com. You'll get a complimentary 45-minute discovery session because we believe in adding value to your life and business. And let me tell you, if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to really go higher, you got to go with the team. And we all need somebody to go farther in life. So just remember this, you're not alone. That's a wrap for this week's episode. We'll see you here next week on the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show. This is Daniel Gomez, and thank you so much for tuning into our show today. We'd love your feedback. Please drop us a comment, and thank you for leaving us a review. Don't forget to subscribe to our show and share this episode with a friend. And my free gift for listening to our show today is a copy of my best-selling book, You Were Born to Fly. To get your free copy, go to danielgomezinspires.com and get your copy today. That's danielgomezinspires.com. And to elevate your life and business even more, follow me on social media at Daniel Gomez Inspires on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Together, we will discover the key that unlocks your confidence.